My stepson held up the reunion binder and said I had cut his dead mother out of her own family history. 3 signed pages were missing. One question went through the room before anyone said it aloud. If I had not changed that binder, who had? I closed the cover before another disputed word could be read. I told everyone lunch and the lawn games would continue, but the story hour would wait until every living contributor decided what could appear under his or her name. Then I put blank approval slips beside the binder. Nora, my stepdaughter, stared at a shortened page carrying her initials and said nothing. I did not yet know whether she would reclaim her words or stand beside her brother. Caleb kept his hand on the binder. "You don't get to shut this down, Martin," he said. "Not after what you did." There were 32 adults in Belrin Grange Hall that afternoon. Most of them had known my wife Elise longer than I had. Her sister Joan stood near the coffee urn. Her cousin Darius had been arranging lawn game teams by the open doors. My sister-in-law Ruth was carrying a bowl of potato salad toward the serving table. They all stopped in different positions, as if someone had taken a photograph before telling them where to look. I had been married to Elise for 21 years. Caleb was 15 when we met, Nora 12. Both were grown now, Caleb 36, Nora 33, and I had never asked them to call me Dad. Sometimes Nora called me Martin, sometimes her stepfather. Caleb always used my first name. But that afternoon, with the binder lifted like an exhibit, Caleb made every ordinary year sound provisional. "Those pages were about Mom before you," he said, "and now they're gone." I could have told the room about the box of notes Elise kept in our kitchen. I could have repeated the private things she said when the house was dark and grief had not yet become a public argument. I could have used the fact that she had trusted me with the first binder to prove I belonged near the second one. Instead, I said, "Your mother is not evidence in a contest between us." Caleb's jaw tightened. Convenient? Maybe. But nobody's private words are going on that table. Not hers, not yours, not mine. Joan came closer. She did not reach for the binder. She pointed to a paragraph visible beneath the clear plastic sleeve. "Why is that sentence under my name?" she asked. It was the first crack in Caleb's accusation, and it arrived before anyone had finished filling a plate. The story binder had begun years earlier in Elise's kitchen. She was the kind of person who would ask one question while slicing apples, and then let you answer until the slices browned. For her mother's 80th birthday, she had asked relatives to write down one memory apiece. Nobody pretended those memories matched. Joan remembered a Christmas argument Elise swore never happened. Darius remembered getting lost at a fair. Elise insisted he had wandered away on purpose. The pleasure was in hearing how one family could contain incompatible rooms. After Elise died, the binder sat on our bottom bookshelf for more than a year. Then Joan suggested an expanded edition for the first reunion without her. Caleb wanted to do it. I did too, though for different reasons. He wanted the Reed family's early years protected. I wanted to hear the stories I had never been present for, without pretending my later years canceled them. We agreed on a simple rule at Nora's dining table. A living adult could write a page or dictate one to me. I would type it and send it back. The contributor could change anything, initial the bottom, or withdraw it. Different memories could sit beside one another. Nobody was allowed to polish another adult's recollection into a single official family version. "A binder isn't a courthouse," Elise's sister Joan had said, "and Martin isn't the historian," Caleb answered. "Neither are you," Nora said. Caleb had looked hurt, then smiled as if he had decided not to make much of it. He offered to print and assemble the reunion copy. Nora labeled the envelopes as approved pages came back. I interviewed people and returned every draft. It seemed like an ordinary division of work. The interviews filled most of my evenings that spring. I called relatives at the hours they chose. Joan preferred 7 in the morning, before her neighbor began mowing. Darius talked from his truck during a rain delay at the landscaping company where he worked. Ruth needed two conversations because the first time she reached the part about Elise bringing a toolbox, she laughed so hard she lost the thread. I learned not to chase a perfect version. When Joan gave me 3 different dates for the same Thanksgiving, I left the date out. When Darius changed ordered to announced and then back to ordered, I sent both choices in the margin. People often knew the emotional shape of an afternoon better than the calendar square that held it. My job was to keep that uncertainty visible, not sand it down until it sounded official. Caleb disliked that. He called one night while I was typing Ruth's second draft. "Mom deserves something finished," he said. "It will have covers and page numbers." You know what I mean. Half these people contradict each other. They contradicted each other when Elise was alive. And she knew when to correct them. I heard what sat beneath that sentence. Elise had been the person he called when a relative repeated a story wrong. Without her, Caleb believed errors would spread unless somebody inherited the right to stop them. "We can mark uncertainty," I said. "We cannot inherit her authority over things we did not see." He was quiet, then asked me to send the approved pages as they arrived so he could plan the sections. I did. I thought cooperation might ease the fear. In hindsight, I had confused access with trust. Still, a family cannot function if every ordinary task begins as a suspicion. Nora saw the tension before I admitted it. At her apartment, while we sorted envelopes, she held up one of Caleb's proposed divider pages. It read, "Before Martin," in large block letters. "That sounds like a geological period," she said. I laughed, but she did not. "Does it bother you?" she asked. "There was a before me." That wasn't my question. It did bother me. Not because the years were named, but because the name made me the dividing event in Elise's life. There was Aaron, there were 2 children, there were jobs and houses and friendships, and then there was the arrival of Martin, as if everything had to be sorted by its distance from me. I told Nora we could use dates instead. Caleb agreed after she suggested it, though he said we were being sensitive about a practical heading. I let the matter end there. That small compromise later helped me understand the larger edits. He had told us what he feared long before he acted on it. Understanding the warning did not make the action inevitable, and it did not make it harmless. Now Joan was looking at a sentence beneath her initials that read, "We Reed children kept our family together, even when outsiders had other ideas." "I never said outsiders," she said. Caleb looked at me. He typed every page. "I typed a different sentence," I said, then stopped. Joan did not need me speaking for her while we argued about people speaking for her. She caught that pause. I kept my copy. From the canvas bag at her feet, she took a folded sheet. It had coffee on one corner and her initials at the bottom. Her approved paragraph said that Elise had been the first Reed sibling to invite spouses and partners to help host holidays. Joan had described that as the moment their family got larger without becoming less itself. Nobody gasped. There was no dramatic silence of the kind people remember correctly afterward. A serving spoon struck the rim of a metal bowl. Someone outside called that the horseshoe pit was ready. The coffee urn clicked. Joan laid her copy beside the page in the sleeve. "I stand behind this one," she said, touching the sheet she had brought. "I don't stand behind that one. Take my name off it." She did not accuse Caleb. She did not clear me. She made one decision about one page. That decision changed the room. Nora moved to the table. Her own page was 2 sleeves farther back. Her initials appeared at the bottom, but the paragraph was barely half the length of the version I remembered typing. "Mine is shorter," she said. Caleb turned toward her. "I tightened some things. That's what editing is." After I initialed it? "There were repetitions." Nora read the page again. The color rose slowly along her neck. I'm not choosing anything yet. Nobody asked you to, I said. Caleb gave a hard, short laugh. You put blank approval slips on the table. I stopped words she hasn't approved from being read to the family. That is all. I asked Joan if she wanted her disputed page placed face down. She did. Then I asked Ruth to keep the lunch line moving and Darius to start the horseshoe teams. Neither had to agree with me to do those things. The reunion had been planned for 11 months. People had driven from 4 states. Elise would have hated being used as a reason 30 adults could not eat potato salad in peace, but I did not say that either. The dead are too easy to recruit because they cannot correct the recruiter. Outside, people tried to behave normally. Metal shoes hit clay, paper plates bent under baked beans. Conversations began, stopped, and restarted when Caleb or I walked close. 3 relatives quietly suggested that I show the messages Elise had sent while we worked on the first binder. 2 wanted Caleb told to leave. 1 told me the fastest way to end it was to admit we had all made mistakes. I had made mistakes. I had corrected Elise's dates when she was telling a funny story. I had once shortened a long account from her uncle because I thought I was helping, and Elise made me restore every word before he saw it. I had learned to listen partly by being bad at it first. But a general admission would not return Joan's sentence or explain Nora's page. False peace would leave somebody else's words under their name. The story hour is paused, I repeated. The reunion isn't. Darius found me on a bench beside the building. He held his binder page in both hands. The facts are mine, he said. The ending isn't. His story was about a family meeting when he was 27. He had been separating from a business partner, and Elise had announced that he wanted the family to stop asking questions. Darius had not wanted that. He had wanted them to ask him directly. Elise apologized the next morning and spent the next month correcting her mistake with every relative she had told. The binder version ended with the family meeting. It made Elise look decisive and protective. Darius's approved version had another paragraph. He recited it without looking at a copy. Elise loved me enough to admit that love had made her careless with my voice. After that, she asked before she explained me to anyone. That paragraph was gone. Did you save your approved page? I asked. No, I assumed approved meant done. Ruth sat beside him. I assumed being interviewed meant I would be in here somewhere. I looked at her. We had spoken twice. Ruth's account was about Elise arriving at her house after Ruth's divorce with a toolbox, not a casserole. The story mattered because Ruth had told Elise she did not want to be treated as fragile. Elise had listened. Ruth had initialed the page and returned it in a blue envelope. There was no page under her name in the binder. Maybe it missed the deadline, Caleb said from behind us. Ruth turned. I gave Nora the envelope. Then ask Nora what happened. Nora had followed him outside. I labeled it, she said. Ruth Vale. Approved. I put it in the stack you took for printing. Caleb looked from his sister to me. So now everybody remembers exactly what helps Martin. My memory helps me, Ruth said. That is the point. She did not raise her voice. Ruth had spent most of her life speaking softly enough that people leaned toward her. If my page is missing, I withdraw it from this edition. I can decide later whether I want it in another one. Caleb pushed both hands into his pockets. There won't be another edition if you let him turn this into a tribunal. Then don't make it one, Nora said. It was the first thing she had said against him, and he heard it as more than it was. You too? He asked. Nora looked down at the shortened page in her hand. I said I'm not choosing yet. By then, people were no longer pretending the binder was a dispute between 2 grieving men. Joan had found words placed under her name. Darius had found the reason for his story removed. Ruth's approved page was absent. Nora was holding an account she had initialed, but no longer recognized as complete. The question had changed. It was not only who had removed pages about Elise, it was who had been allowed to turn other adults' memories into a cleaner version of her. Caleb wanted a vote before dessert. He stood near the center of the hall and said the family should decide whether the binder represented Elise fairly. He said Reed relatives should have the final word because they knew her before I did. Several people nodded, not because they agreed with every part, but because voting promised an end to discomfort. "We are not voting on Elise," I said, "because you'd lose, because she is dead, and because none of us gets to turn her into a ballot." He looked around the room. "Then what do you want?" "I want Joan to decide what sits under Joan's name. Darius decides what sits under his. Ruth decides whether she participates. Nora decides what she said. You decide what you say. I decide what I say." That gives us fragments. We are fragments. The line sounded more polished than I intended, and I regretted it as soon as it left my mouth. This was not a lesson I had arrived to deliver. It was a family trying to get through one afternoon without allowing its most frightened member to become its official translator. Joan rescued me from sounding wise. "Can I have one of those slips?" she asked. Before I could answer, Caleb lifted the disputed binder again. "Look at what he is doing," he said. "He gets accused and suddenly he invents a process where every person reports a complaint. By the end, nobody remembers the accusation." "I remember it," I said. "Then answer it." I did not remove Elise's pages. It was the first time I had said the sentence that plainly. I had been so careful not to make the afternoon a contest that I had left room for restraint to look like evasion. "I typed the approved drafts," I continued. "You took the returned packet to print and assemble it. That is what I know. Joan knows her sentence changed. Darius knows his ending is gone. Ruth knows her page is absent. Nora knows hers is shorter. They do not need me to turn those facts into a speech." Caleb's face went pale. "So you are accusing me. I am answering your accusation and limiting what happens next. Those are not the same thing." "You handed me a mess. Somebody had to make it readable." The words hung between us. They were not a confession to each specific change. He could still claim formatting, missed pages, or mistakes. But for the first time he acknowledged making decisions after the packet reached him. Nora closed her eyes. Joan looked at the floor. I felt no triumph. The room had become exactly what I had tried to prevent, a place where Caleb's fear was visible to everyone before he was ready to name it. So I did not press him. "Then this next part is about whether each person accepts those decisions," I said. Caleb looked almost startled that I had left him somewhere to stand. I carried the stack to the center table. "Only if you want one." We set a time after dessert for anyone whose page had changed or disappeared. No one had to read. Silence would not be counted as agreement. Nobody could handle somebody else's page. The circle was not a vote about who loved Elise. It was only a decision about what each living adult would put their name beneath in a possible next edition. Caleb called it bureaucracy. Darius called it 10 minutes of manners. Both descriptions contained some truth. Nora asked me to step onto the porch with her. The Grange Hall faced a soybean field. Heat made the far rows look loose at the edges. Nora sat on the top step with both versions of her page on her knees. "You remember what I wrote?" she asked. "Some of it." "Tell me." "No." Her eyebrows rose. "You have both pages," I said. "You don't need my memory between you and your own words." She looked at the shorter one first. It said Elise had always felt grounded by the Reed family and had made sure her children knew where they came from. That was true as far as it went. The original also described a winter night when Nora was 22. She had called her mother after losing her first full-time job. Elise listened for 5 minutes. then began correcting every conclusion Nora drew. Nora hung up. The next day, Elise came to our house angry with herself. "I keep trying to fix the people I love before I hear what they are actually saying," Elise had told me. She asked how I stayed quiet. I told her I did not always stay quiet. I just knew what happened when a stepfather rushed to explain a young woman's own life to her. Nora's original page ended with her mother calling again and listening without correction. It said Elise told her, "Martin has been teaching me that room is not the same as distance." Caleb had removed the lost job story, the apology, and my name. He kept only the sentence about read roots. "If I choose the original, he'll say I chose you," Nora said. "You may withdraw both." "That isn't what I asked." "I know, but it is one answer you should have before you decide." She studied me. "Do you want the original in there?" Of course I did. The mention of me felt like a hand reaching backward through the worst 18 months of my life, but wanting it did not make it mine. "I want whatever you can stand behind," I said, "even if that is nothing." "Caleb thinks losing her pages means losing her again." "I understand that." "Do you?" "Not the way he does." That was the only honest answer. Caleb had lost his mother, I had lost my wife. Those griefs met in the same house, but they were not interchangeable and did not need a winner. Inside, chairs scraped into a loose circle. Darius had set a glass of water beside every third chair. Joan was writing on an approval slip. Ruth stood by the open doors, deciding whether to stay. "I'm not going to ask you to defend me," I told Nora. "He will ask me to defend him." "Then make him ask in his own words." The contribution circle began with fewer people than had attended lunch. Some relatives chose the lawn. Others remained at the edges of the room without joining. That mattered. No one was trapped into witnessing a family correction just because they had come for baked beans and horseshoes. Joan went first. "My approved memory says this family grew when we welcomed the people we loved," she said. "It does not say spouses or outsiders." "I authorize my original page. I withdraw the page in the binder." She initialed a new slip and folded her retained page around it. Caleb stared at the floor. Darius held no saved copy, so he did not pretend one had materialized. He read the binder version, then dictated the ending he remembered approving. Ruth remembered hearing him practice it on the phone before he submitted it. I remembered typing it. Neither of us signed for him. "I authorized the version with my ending restored," Darius said. "If the wording is off, Martin can type it and send it back to me. Nothing goes in until I approve it again." His choice was different from Joan's. Her own paper showed the change. His memory identified the missing meaning, but he still required a fresh review, rather than asking the room to take his recollection as perfect. Ruth sat with empty hands. "My page is not here," she said. "I returned it. Nora labeled it. I am withdrawing from this edition. I may submit again later. That is not permission for anyone to summarize what I would have said." 3 adults had now chosen 3 different paths: restore, revise, withdraw. None asked to punish Caleb or declared me innocent. Together they made one fact impossible to ignore. The assembled binder could not speak with their authority. Caleb looked at Nora. "Yours is about Mom. It's the one that matters." Joan's mouth tightened, but she stayed quiet. "They are all about her," Nora said. "You know what I mean. You and I are her children." "Yes." "Then don't let him make her into the person he wants." Nora held the 2 pages apart. "This shorter one says something I believe. Mom cared where we came from. She made sure we knew the Reed stories." Caleb nodded once. "But I did not write only that," she continued. "I wrote about the night she called me back. I wrote that she learned to listen. I wrote that Martin helped her learn it. You cut those things. I edited a tribute. You edited me." Caleb finally looked up. His face was not the face of a man caught enjoying cruelty. It was the face he had worn at the funeral home when someone moved Elise's photograph 6 inches to make room for flowers. He had moved it back and stood beside it for an hour. "Every story he is in pushes Dad farther out," he said. Their father, Aaron Reed, had died years before I met Elise. I had never asked for his place either. Nora's voice softened. "Dad is in my first paragraph. Martin is in my last one. Mom had a life long enough to love both of them." Caleb shook his head. "You don't know what this becomes in 10 years. His family gets the binder. The Reed stories turn into footnotes." There it was. Not an excuse, but the fear that had been steering him. He believed memory was a shelf with limited space. Every page that included me seemed to push his father or his childhood closer to the edge. Nora did not tell him the fear was foolish. She did not forgive the method because the fear was human. "Then write your memory," she said. "Put Dad in every line if that is what you remember, but you cannot remove my last paragraph to make room." She placed the shortened page face down. "I authorize my original. It is not a vote for Martin. It is not a vote against you. It is what I said." No one applauded. I was grateful for that. Nora remained standing after she placed the shortened page down. "There is one more thing," she said. "Caleb is right about part of this. We have been careless with Dad." The room shifted again. Caleb looked at her with sudden hope, and I had to stop myself from hearing her sentence as a retreat. "After Martin married Mom," Nora continued, "we sometimes told Aaron stories as if they were only the opening chapter before the real family arrived. Martin never asked us to do that. Mom never asked us to do it. We did it because grief gets awkward and a living person is easier to arrange around than a dead one." She lifted her original page. "This begins with Dad teaching Caleb to float at the public pool. It ends with Mom learning to listen from Martin. Both belong because I remember both. If we protect Dad by cutting Martin, we repeat the same disrespect in the other direction." Caleb sat down. The fight went out of his shoulders, though not the anger. I wanted to thank Nora. I did not. Gratitude from me would have made her choice look like a gift she had given her stepfather. She had taken back her own page. That was enough. Joan asked if anyone else wished to review a page. 2 relatives said they would take theirs home before approving them again. Paul, who had not contributed, said he might write something about Aaron for the next edition. Nobody objected. A page about Aaron did not threaten me. If my belonging required his absence, it would be the same brittle belonging Caleb had tried to build. The circle ended without deciding whose memory of Elise was best. That unfinished quality made some people restless. It made me breathe more easily. Caleb folded his arms and looked toward the doors. He did not confess. He did not need to. We knew he had taken the approved packet for assembly. Joan knew her words had changed. Darius knew his ending was gone. Ruth's labeled page had vanished. Nora's account had been cut toward the same blood-only version Caleb had been arguing for all day. But the next decision did not require us to pronounce a verdict on his private intent. The process had failed. That was enough to change the process. Joan asked who would keep the binder next. "Nobody keeps this copy as an approved edition," Ruth said. Darius suggested 2 people assemble any future copy together, neither from the same household. Nora proposed that custody rotate after each round of contributions. Joan added that absent adults could not be summarized at all. If they wanted a page, they could send one. If they wanted silence, the blank space would remain blank. I added one condition for myself. I would still type for anyone who wanted help, but another person would send the draft back for approval. I would not be sole custodian either. Caleb said, "So you take it from me and call that fairness?" "Sole custody ends," Joan said, "for you, for Martin, for all of us." "Because he embarrassed me." "Because my sentence changed," she answered. Darius lifted his page. "Because my ending disappeared." Ruth held out her empty hands. Because I disappeared. Before anyone answered, Elise's brother-in-law, Paul, spoke from the back row. He had not contributed a page. He said maybe Caleb had only removed material that made the binder too long, and maybe a family project required one editor willing to disappoint people. That is true of a magazine, Darius said. We did not submit to a magazine. Paul turned to me. You were an editor too. You typed it. I corrected spelling when people asked. I sent every other change back. But you made choices. Yes. The room waited for me to defend the purity of my process. I could not. I had chosen where paragraphs broke. I had occasionally asked whether a repeated phrase was deliberate. Every act of typing contains choices. That is why contributors reviewed the pages, I said. The review did not make me neutral. It made my choices answerable to them. Paul rubbed his forehead. This is a lot for a family scrapbook. It became a lot when words changed after people approved them, Joan said. His objection was reasonable. Families simplify stories constantly. They shorten, combine, and repeat. If every imprecise retelling required a hearing, no one would survive Thanksgiving. But this was not an argument over whether Elise wore a blue coat or a green one. A sentence naming spouses as outsiders had replaced a welcome. An apology about speaking for Darius had vanished. Ruth's account of asking not to be treated as fragile was gone. Nora's story had been cut until only blood loyalty remained. The edits all leaned in one direction. Paul eventually nodded to Joan. Then I guess the question is whether you approved it. I didn't, she said. That is an answer I can understand. Nora did not add another charge. She had made her choice already. The disputed binder was placed in a plain cardboard box, not destroyed and not displayed. It remained a record of what had gone wrong, but no one would read it as the family's approved voice. Joan took the sealed packet, containing only pages their contributors had personally authorized. Nora took the blank approval log. Darius agreed to assemble with Joan 6 weeks later. Caleb could submit his own page under the same rule. He could attend future interview days. He could disagree with every memory in the binder. He could not edit them, hold the only copy, or tell us what absent relatives would have said. He was not asked to leave the reunion. The rest of the afternoon did not become warm. Family stories often skip from a decisive choice to people passing pie as if appetite proves peace. Joan cried in the supply closet where she thought no one could hear. She was grieving the altered sentence and the fact that Caleb, whom she had held as a baby, had decided her welcome did not fit his mother. Darius stood outside without entering. When she emerged, he handed her a paper towel because the hall had run out of napkins. Ruth packed her potato salad before it grew warm. She told Nora she was not angry at her, then admitted she was angry with everyone who had treated Martin and Caleb as the only people whose grief shaped the binder. Her missing page had been discussed mostly as evidence in our conflict. Withdrawing it was how she stopped that from happening. Nora went outside alone for 20 minutes. Caleb did not follow. Neither did I. I carried trash bags to the dumpster and discovered my hands were shaking. The accusation had landed after 18 months of paperwork, empty rooms, and people addressing condolence cards to the Reed family, while I lived in the house where Elise's shoes still occupied half a closet. I had told myself names on envelopes did not matter. At the dumpster, I admitted they had mattered every time. Joan found me there. "You could have told me," she said. "About the cards?" "About any of it. I didn't want to make you responsible for proving I belonged." She leaned against the brick wall. "There is a distance between making me responsible and never letting me see you." That was a correction I needed. Restraint can protect other people, but it can also become a hiding place. I had spent so long refusing to compete with Caleb that I sometimes made Nora and Joan guess whether I was hurt. The new binder rules could not solve that habit for me. "The cards hurt," I said. "Today hurt worse." Joan nodded. She did not reassure me with a title. She said, "I am sorry we made you carry that quietly." Then we went back inside, separately. For the last hour, he stacked chairs beside Darius. He did not apologize. Darius did not use the labor as proof of transformation. Sometimes a person stacks chairs because chairs need stacking, and because leaving would feel worse. In the parking lot, Caleb caught up with me beside my car. "You got what you wanted," he said. "No. Nora chose your page." "She chose her page." "Same thing. That is the thing we disagree about." His face twisted. "You have been waiting to become the reasonable one since the day you married her." That accusation reached farther back than the binder. I thought of all the holidays when I had carried a folding chair to the end of the table and waited for someone to tell me where it belonged. I thought of Aaron's photograph on Elise's dresser, and the first time Caleb saw me dust around it without moving it. I thought of how carefully I had tried to earn a place that love had already complicated. "I did want you to think I was reasonable," I said. "Too much sometimes, but I did not remove your mother. And I will not remove your father. I also will not let you remove me from Nora's memory, or remove Ruth from her own." "You think this makes you family?" "No. It tells you how I will behave, whether you call me family or not." He looked toward the hall. Through the doors, Nora and Joan were carrying the sealed packet together. "You took her away from me twice," he said. "I hear that you feel that way." "That isn't an answer." "It is the only one I have that does not pretend I know your grief better than you do." I told him he could call me when he was ready to speak for himself, and let me do the same. I would not discuss Nora through him, and I would not carry his messages to her. Then I left. 6 weeks later, Joan cleared one end of her dining table. There were no speeches and no reunion audience. She and Darius had 7 approved pages, 1 withdrawn page, and 2 drafts still out for review. Ruth had decided to try again. She changed 3 lines in her toolbox story and took it home for another week before initialing it. I attended by phone for 40 minutes to answer questions about formatting. Nora kept the approval log. No one asked me to settle a disputed memory. Caleb submitted 2 pages. The first was about his father teaching him to ride a bicycle in the church parking lot. Elise appeared only at the end, running behind them with a bandage in one hand because she knew he would fall. It was funny, specific, and entirely his. The second page described the winter Nora lost her job. In it, Caleb wrote that Nora had felt abandoned when Martin became involved. Joan called him. "You can write that you believed she felt abandoned," she said. "You cannot write what she felt." He argued for 10 minutes. He said everybody understood the distinction without needing fussy language. Joan said the distinction was the reason they were doing this. Darius did not pile on. Nora did not take the phone. The page went back. 2 days later, Caleb returned it with 1 sentence changed. "I believed Nora felt abandoned when Martin became involved." There was no apology attached. The revision did not repair 21 years. But it was the first time I saw him put a boundary inside his own sentence. The small edition was assembled with the bicycle story, Joan's holiday page, Darius's restored ending, Nora's original account, and 3 others. Ruth's page joined later after she approved it. Each contributor kept a copy of their own final sheet. Joan held the binder for 1 month, then passed it to Darius. The approval log traveled separately with Nora. The arrangement was slower than giving one careful person a stack and a deadline. That was a cost we could name and accept. 4 months after the reunion, Nora hosted an interview afternoon in the back room of a neighborhood library. She asked me to be one of 3 interviewers. Darius and an older cousin named Lenora were the others. We sat at separate tables so no contributor had to perform for a group. Before each conversation, Nora said, You can answer, revise, or pass. If we paraphrase, we ask. You approve the page later, not today. The words became ordinary by the fifth interview. That was how I knew the practice might last. A boundary becomes durable when people no longer need a fresh crisis to remember it. Caleb came for 1 hour. He interviewed Joan about the year Elise learned to drive. Twice he began a sentence with, "What she means is," and twice stopped himself. Joan waited. On the third try, he asked, "Is that what you mean?" She said no and explained it differently. He wrote down her answer. Caleb and I spoke for less than 5 minutes that day. He asked whether I had brought the old photographs Nora requested. I said yes. He thanked me. We did not discuss the reunion. We did not embrace. He left before coffee, and nobody chased him into the parking lot to complete a scene for us. That evening, Nora took 3 draft pages home. Darius took 2. I took none. My work was finished until someone asked me to type. A week later, an envelope arrived from Lenora. She had not contributed at the reunion. Inside was a page in her slanted handwriting, and a note asking that Joan read it before anyone typed it. Joan had remembered Elise inviting spouses into the kitchen during a crowded Thanksgiving. Lenora remembered it differently. She said Elise had first tried to send all the in-laws into the living room, then burned the rolls while doing everything herself. Only after Joan laughed and handed me a dish towel did Elise surrender the serving spoon. Lenora did not ask for Joan's page to be corrected. She asked for hers to sit beside it. Her contribution began, "Joan remembers the welcome. I remember the moment before it, when Elise was still learning how to make room."